I am in third year and I'm majoring in art history and I'm minoring in French studies and philosophy.
What is your role at the art committee?
I am co-chair of the acquisitions subcommittee, which means that every year the acquisition subcommittee gets a budget and we select an artwork from a emerging Canadian artist to be incorporated into the Hart House collection. I manage a group of, we have 11 subcommittee members. We receive a short list of artists from the curators at the art museum. We conduct research on those artists, their production, their process, any artworks that they have available, and the galleries that represent them. And then from there, we narrow down the list and narrow down the list and narrow down the list, which is a painful process because everyone that we've researched is so amazing. But eventually we come to a conclusion of one artwork and then we purchase that artwork and it goes into the Hart House collection. Just such a cool opportunity to like have students participate in that. So it's a really terrific position. I'm very, very, very happy and lucky that I get to be like managing that. So
Why did you decide to join the art committee?
I joined because I was looking to be involved on campus, more involved than I had been in high school. Because I was a pretty eager first year, and this was the first year around me where there were opportunities and like things and people who were interested in the same sort of things that I was interested in. So I actually found the committee in the summer before first year. And then in late September, after I had started at U of T, I saw that they were looking for a first year voting member. And then I did more research into the committee and was like, wow, this is like definitely something that I want to be a part of. So I applied and then I was lucky enough to be elected. And then I've stayed on the committee in like multiple different roles until now. I joined all the way back in first year, and it's been really central to my time at U of T and one of the most rewarding experiences that I've had. It's afforded me so many opportunities, and I've met so many great people because of it, because we all share the same passions and interests. And it's like just been a lot of fun.
What was high school like for you?
I was definitely pretty studious, but I wasn't really a part of any extracurriculars. I'm pretty terrible at sports. And then the other option was to be a part of this like leadership club that my friends were in, but I don't really know, what they did. They like chanted or something. Either way, didn't really appeal to me. I'm a francophone. My high school had French immersion and I had gone to a French elementary school. So I did a lot of like one off things. Like I did French public speaking contests. I loved my law classes. I loved my art classes. They were some of the best teachers I've ever had. High school overall wasn't a bad experience for me. I met a lot of really terrific people and like friends that I'm still super close with now. But like that being said, I think now is a lot better.
What was your favorite class?
One class that I really loved was my grade 11 art class, which was one of the first like major interactions I got to have with art history. And I got to also do some like studio work, which was so much fun. My high school was like chock full of just like blank white walls. So our final exam for that class was we got to paint a mural, and that was incredible and super rewarding. And I feel like studio art classes are something that like if you're interested in art history you should try, because it gives you such like a deeper appreciation of how hard like draftsmanship is. And like if you're a person like me who really likes conceptual art, doing studio art made me appreciate art that's just like beautiful and aesthetically pleasing and difficult to produce on its own. So, I also took a philosophy class when I was in grade 12, and that was really, really fun too. And I enjoyed that so much that I started doing philosophy in university, and now I'm minoring in it, and that was amazing. All in all, my school was, as I find the case is with most like public high schools, is it was pretty focused on math and science education and didn't appreciate how challenging and rewarding history and philosophy and language classes could be. So I took as many history classes as I could to kind of put together my own curriculum, but that's kind of hard to manage if you're like bad at math and science like I am.
What difficulties did you face in your final year of high school?
Well, by the end of high school, I was suffering from like really bad senioritis. I had spread myself like super thin and was just burnt out and exhausted. Even though I like hadn't even been doing that many extracurriculars, high school is way more demanding than people give it credit for, even if you're trying really hard. So I was just like really, really, really tired, and I had been accepted at U of T already, and I checked out pretty much. It passed eventually. I had some really, really good friends, and I have some really good friends that I met in high school, who have always been like good motivators for me. And I had to kind of remember that it's not like me to not want to try. I still had like goals and things that I wanted to learn. And just because I'd gotten into a good university doesn't mean that I don't have those goals anymore. Like, if I had lost the desire to keep learning, I shouldn't be going to university for the reason that I was going.
What difficulties did you face during your transition from high school to university?
The transition, like the end of high school, is definitely very hard because you're kind of just like focusing on getting through it and you feel like you're really done with it. But like the important thing to remember is that like if you are going on to university, if that's the kind of path that you're choosing, that like it is going to be more work, but that's why it's important that you not forget why you're doing it and like why you love the thing that you're studying and like why you're interested in the things that you're interested in.
Do you have a piece of advice for high school seniors?
My like main piece of advice is to like if you start with good habits, do not break those good habits. Try and keep going with them to the best of your ability, which I understand is much easier said than done, but it is a lot harder to hop on a bandwagon that you've fallen off. Everybody gets lazy. I get lazy all the time, and like it's a good challenge and a skill that's good to build, where even if you are feeling lazy, knowing that there's work to do, and then if you don't do it, it's going to be harder to do later.
Did you ever doubt the path you chose?
I never really had substantial doubts about going into art history. I've always kind of had it in the back of my mind. I've always been a very visually literate person, and it became very clear to me early in high school that I'm not meant to be a scientist or a mathematician. It's just not in the cards for me, no matter how fascinating I think those fields are. Even then, I've always found art and culture to be more fascinating personally. And any doubt that I did have about art history, I feel like they didn't really come from me. They came from other people who didn't understand why I wanted to do it and what I was doing, the value in it, and how like actually genuinely challenging it is. But immediately after getting to university and taking my first art history class, I was like pretty certain that I had made the right call.
What high school experiences best prepared you for university?
The most valuable thing was again like my grade 11 art teacher who was really encouraging about going into the arts and was a really good at showing me how art theory was valuable and not just a waste of time and can benefit things like studio practice and translate really well into other subjects. He was a really good teacher who was really capable of showing that there is like a fundamentally good and interesting art world outside of a high school art class. Other things that I found super useful and rewarding was my law class. I took law in grade 11 and 12, and that was really good because it encourages you and forces you to be really clear in your ways of thinking and be very logical. Same deal with the philosophy class that I took in grade 12, where it's really important that you be logical and concise and clear, and I've found that to be super useful and helpful in university and in the work that I'm doing now.
Is there anything high schoolers should be focusing more on?
I think that it's super important to get good at reading and writing in an efficient way when you're in high school. Clarity is super important, both in trying to have a clear head when you're reading something really difficult and also being clear and concise in your writing, because no one is going to care how pretty something sounds if they have no idea what you mean. Like, being a good writer is more about being clear. And then on top of that, you can build like stylistically. And that's something that I think is really important to get good at when you're in high school, because then when you're in university, you can build on that clarity to then write really compelling prose and essays. Also, please, this is like a personal pet peeve, please do not start essays with like big sweeping statements about the nature of humanity. I have definitely fallen victim to this and it never ends well. Professors don't like it. And now when I read those essays over, I'm like, oh, how to be young and naive. And then I feel like, like putting my head through a wall. Like, it's just not, it doesn't work well. Don't do it.
What is it like to study in the arts?
I really love studying the arts. I find it super rewarding and like challenging in all of the right ways. Arts education gives you a really interesting critical eye that you can like apply to anything. And that's what I think my favorite part is seeing how like more abstract theory comes up in my everyday life. But also at the same time, that is really hard. And like I definitely find myself thinking about things in new ways in my everyday life. And then it's also just like it's a lot of work. I have a big chair next to my window over here that I is just like my reading chair. I have a table to put my feet up on and I sit there for like at least 3 hours a day.
Did anything surprise you during your first year at university?
The main thing that I'd say that surprised me is that it's not actually the Wild West out here. You do need to learn how to advocate for yourself, which is understandably really hard at times, but there's a lot of structures in place and people whose job it is to help you. And in my experience, they don't just like throw you in the deep end and expect you to drown. Like, there are people who want you to succeed and who are there to help you if you want it. And some of those services could arguably be better across the board, but they're still there. Like, no one is rooting for you specifically to fail. And I feel like people might be hearing that university is a lot scarier than it is. It's a lot more comfortable than you think. You also don't think that it is going to change how you think about things, but it definitely does. Education is a process, and through that process, you become a different person. And I have like definitely noticed that about myself, that who I am when I graduated high school is not who I am now. And then also like this is another like trivial point, but the food isn't as good as people tell you it is on tours. It's gonna suck no matter where you are, no matter what university you go to. You will be malnourished no matter what you do. Good luck if you're a vegan or vegetarian, because you're just gonna be eating like raw broccoli all year.
What courses have you taken?
In first year, I took my first introductory philosophy class, which was taught by this like really amazing professor. He lectured with his eyes closed. He was the best. And he made it really funny and accessible and easy to understand. It was a pretty big class. I think it was like maybe 300 of us, but it was in like the best lecture theater on campus. Isabel Bader has the most comfortable seats. But I found that class to be super useful because philosophical writing is based on constructing like a good logical argument, which is a skill that you need like no matter what you're doing. I really recommend that like everyone take a philosophy class at some point in their undergrad. And that's why I've kind of kept going with philosophy. And I swear, like U of T has one of the strongest philosophy departments. I have like not taken a course from them that I didn't love. Then there are a couple, there's one that I took last year that was a cultures of display in the 19th century class, which was incredible. The professor was amazing, and the assignments let you be really creative and work from primary sources and like original documents, which is something that I hadn't really done before then. And like I left every lecture feeling like I was like gonna start crying because he always left me with like something to think about. But like my favorite class that I think I've ever taken at U of T was this fourth year seminar that I took last semester called Art and Oceania, which I found to be the most rewarding class I've ever taken. It gave me some really interesting new perspectives on colonial histories and art history and a refreshed look at like ethics in academia and contemporary culture in general. I haven't had a course that like forced me to be so critical before, and those discussions were honestly just enlightening and amazing. And enlightening is like a super cliche word to use, but like I can't think of a better one.
What extracurriculars are you doing in university?
Well, I'm also on the UC Review masthead, which is a literary and visual arts journal that's put out twice a year. Last year, I was an associate editor, and then this year, I'm promotions coordinator. That has been a really useful experience too. That came after being on the committee for a year already. I started doing that last year, and participating in the adjudication and editing process of a literary review is a really interesting and valuable experience that translates super well to writing and editing of any kind, especially for doing like research positions and stuff. Being able to edit and adjudicate and be critical is super, super, super important. But as far as like really fun extracurriculars go, not to say that art committee and UC review aren't fun. I have the time of my life on those, but I was also an orientation leader when I was in second year, which was so fun. I just got to be like pumped full of free iced coffee and like yerba and falafel, and then just got to be like really excited about everything for a week. And then I like calmed down again, but it was kind of like a big catharsis. And that was like I learned a lot from that experience too, because you can take anything from any experience. But that was really fun and like morale boosting, and I feel like made me a little bit more of an optimistic person because I like it was nice to like be in a really positive and supportive environment. And I feel like being an orientation leader really gives you that opportunity to like foster that kind of environment, which is a good skill to have.
How did you get your position at the art committee?
My like path to co-chair of acquisitions is a little bit different because I really kind of climbed the art committee ladder. I was first year voting member and I worked really hard at that, and then became communications officer unexpectedly early. I joined the committee in October of first year was my first executive meeting, and our communications officer was graduating early. She was going to be leaving in December, so they needed someone to take over communications for the committee and run all of our social media. So I started doing that right away when I was in first year, and I worked really hard at that. The chair the next year decided to keep me on as communications officer, and that became my official title last year. And then this year, again, I had been wanting to be on acquisitions since first year. That's like one of the main reasons that I joined the committee, is because I like thought that this was such an exceptional opportunity and was something that I was really interested in participating in. So I reapplied at the end of second year, and then I was lucky enough to be chosen to be co-chair of acquisitions. I wasn't really like an external hire, like people on the committee knew me. So, and I definitely like benefited from that. Yeah, so my path to acquisitions was a little bit different. I definitely had other experiences in other classes doing things like art criticism and being on the UC review that are things that definitely have helped in this position. But I think the main thing that helped was being a very eager first year and jumping on the bandwagon kind of early.
What is the most interesting aspect of your position as co chair of the acquisition subcommittee?
Well, the thing that I find most interesting and like consequentially most fun is how much I get to learn from the people on my subcommittee. They're all so incredibly smart, and it's shocking to me that I am the co-chair. They're so intelligent and they're such good writers and they're such great researchers and they're such great critics that, and they also like, they always have something really interesting to contribute in all of our meetings, and the research that everyone has done has been so genuinely interesting to read that my favorite part about being on this committee is like how much I get to learn from everyone, which like in a leadership role people don't really talk about, like learning from being a leader, like learning from people on your subcommittee. But that has been one of the most interesting and valuable experiences that I've had on the committee.
What is the most difficult aspect?
There's definitely a lot of challenges. There's a lot of commitments that I have to make in this position and follow through on that are much easier said than done. Scheduling is always a challenge. I'm terrible at managing my time and balancing how much work everyone is doing with events and other things that aren't work, because that's another thing that I do as co-chair of acquisitions is we try to plan events for our subcommittee members, whether that be networking opportunities or just really interesting learning experiences and tours, which obviously given the current circumstances we can't really do any in-person tours. But it's like it's a lot to manage in addition to like a full course load and commitments to other student groups that I'm a part of, and like personal commitments as well. Like obviously I can't see my friends in person right now, but I still try to like FaceTime with them regularly. Juggling everything at once is very difficult when you have a very full schedule to start with. And like being an undergraduate university student is a full-time job in and of itself. So this is like it is a lot to take on, but I think that it's worth it for me.
How has this position been useful with developing a valuable set of skills?
The main thing that I can think of is criticism of contemporary art by emerging artists is a lot harder than criticism of art that has already been criticized, because people have already had ideas about it. And then in that case, you can respond to those ideas as opposed to responding directly to an artwork. Whereas, like in the work that I'm doing, where these artists haven't necessarily had a lot written about them, much less anything critical, it's a lot more difficult. So it's a lot of trying to form your own opinions, which is like the hardest part of any kind of research and study of anything. And learning how to do that in this capacity as co-chair of acquisitions has been so beneficial for me in writing more opinionated essays than I had before. Also, thinking about how things fit into the collection, as well as understanding how different artworks work together and complement each other, is also super helpful in art writing. Especially because a lot of things that I've had to write in my art history classes have been exhibition proposals. This is like a real life exhibition proposal essentially, because it's an acquisition proposal, but I find that that works really well together, and it has been very, very, very useful because you have to like really have a strong opinion about something and really advocate for something and the organization of how different things complement each other, and I that has been great.
What can a university graduate do with a degree like yours?
Focusing more on the like art history side of my degree, I honestly think that it prepares you for anything that requires a degree of visual literacy and criticism. So that can obviously be career paths like an art history professor or a museum professional, but also things like journalism and marketing, even law. Like you don't have to do criminology in undergrad to become a lawyer. You can synthesize careers with an artistic perspective as well. So like art journalism, copyright, and other like art related fields in law, archiving, things like that. They are all really like art history prepares you really well for all of those. Philosophy is also a great prep for law. And then French is just like such a terrific skill to have. So if you're in like immersion or core or like any kind of French program in high school, I really recommend keeping going with that, because having a second language is super duper duper useful. And like that's my good solid safety blanket, because like everyone always needs somebody bilingual.
What do you plan on doing after graduating?
I took an aesthetics course last semester that made me reevaluate everything. I used to think that I wanted to go into museum work and curating, but this class made me think about how if I go into academia and become a professor, that allows me to change my focus easily. And plenty of professors curate exhibitions on the side. I remember my like first year art history professor was curating an exhibition on like the same kind of course material that he was teaching us, and I thought that that was so amazing. And that's definitely something that I'm really interested in and passionate about. But I think that academia would let me be really theoretical and critical. And I also think that I would really enjoy teaching. Either way, I really like school. I'm planning on getting a master's and a PhD after I finish my undergrad. So throughout that time, my idea is to keep working and developing a diverse enough skill set that if I change my mind and I decide that I want to focus on becoming a museum professional, or I want to focus on being an art history or aesthetics professor, that my options are still open. Because again, that's the thing about like my degree is that I feel like it really gives me a lot of options to do things that I'm interested in.
What's one final piece of advice you'd offer high schoolers?
The main like this is something that I wish like people told me more in high school is like it's okay to relax a little bit. Like think about what you find rewarding and find a way to balance that with everything else. Cause like sometimes I understand that you need to focus on getting from like point A to point B, but it's also important to enjoy the process in between. And then if like the in between really sucks, point B also does just come eventually. Like everything keeps going, nothing is the end of the world, nothing is forever, which sounds really like pessimistic and kind of scary, but it can also be a really comforting thought and something that you can understand as positive. And I find that to be really important for me. I can stress about an exam all that I want, and then when that exam comes up, like it's over after that. I don't have to think about it again. And that I find to be something like really positive and like this too shall pass.